Chris Paul. It's a love-hate relationship. We hated him when he was on the Warriors, especially when he was on Houston. Now that he joined us this year, we love him. Chris Paul, Scott Foster, do not go like this ever. Terrible relationship. A new NBA referee has come out and said Chris Paul is the worst player he's ever reffed. 30 plus years. We're going to break down the comments and more. Randy Silva here. Please subscribe. You don't miss anything on Warriors Digest Daily. We thank you for supporting us as we break the biggest Warriors stories for you daily. Chris Paul, point God. A former NBA ref drops truth bomb about Chris Paul, one of the biggest a-holes I ever dealt with. That is saying something. Biggest a-holes ever as a referee. Obviously, there's going to be some calls you like, some calls you don't like. But to have that bad of a stigma, that bad of a rap with a referee is... And it's not Scott Foster. Bill Spooner. And here's a photo of Bill Spooner, so you get the face of the name. Again, it's not Foster. We know that Foster, Paul have major beef. But Spooner was on the podcast, and he said this. I'm going to tell you, I know you are recording me, but I get asked all the time, who are some of the tough guys, some of the bad guys? And when I tell you them this, in my 32 years in the league, Chris Paul was one of the biggest a-holes I ever dealt with. They say, not Rasheed Wallace or Nope, nothing like Paul. And they're like, oh, he seems like such a nice guy. And I say, yeah, he's a great image cultivator. Those are some harsh words. NBA refs are supposed to be impartial. Is that true? That's up to you to decide. You can comment below. But to get someone to say that is brutal. Imagine wherever you work, in the office, in the field, and one of your coworkers or one of the partners you work with or someone on the outside organization who you come around in contact with says you're one of the biggest a-holes ever. What if it's one of your family members? Those are harsh criticisms. And someone's not just going to say that for nothing. There has to, unfortunately, be some validity to that. Obviously, when Chris Paul wasn't on the Warriors, it was very much a hate relationship. Him and Draymond, boom, they butted heads. And they talked about that, especially on Draymond's podcast when Chris Paul came on this year. They talked about they had to have a sit-down, air out the grievances, and now they're on the same team. It's gravy. And Chris Paul was great for the Warriors this year. Great teammate, great professional, someone that the team looked up to, some of the young players like Paul to learn from, and was someone I'd love to have back. And we talked about this on many episodes. But the referees, if he retired this year after 20 plus years, probably would be okay with it. They'd be like, goodbye. We're lucky to have this headache out of us. Now, again, we know his issue has always been with Scott Foster, but maybe it's bigger. And it seemed alienated to Scott Foster. But if this is actually a bigger issue among referees, it's not just Chris and one referee, then you have to look at it and say, you know what? What is actually happening? To analyze the Scott Foster situation, this was from 2 years ago. Paul was in his 18th season, and his overall playoff record with Foster as a referee was 2-17, a 105 winning percentage. Other games when it wasn't Scott Foster, 70-54, a 564 winning percentage when Foster wasn't part of the game crew. You win 1 out of 10 games when Foster, an individual referee, is not refereeing you in the playoffs. You win 5 out of 10 games when Foster is not refereeing you in the playoffs. Literally, that means if Foster doesn't referee Chris Paul and his team in the playoffs, they win a 7-game series. If Foster is refereeing Chris Paul in a 7-game series, they're not going to win the playoff. They're not going to win that series. That is massive. And you can't deny that outlier. 2 out of 17 is a massive sample size. 70 out of 54, of course, is a massive sample size. So there is validity there, and we know this, and they've talked about it. Foster and Paul don't get along. But is that making the way that Paul plays in those games different because he knows he may get teched easily, he may get a foul easier? Is his team psyched out? Or is Foster alienating Paul, alienating his team because he doesn't like them? Comment your thoughts. And take a look at this. So now we're going to look at those games that they lost. Again, 2-17, a minus 132 percentage. A lot of those games are close. Sub 10-point games. If I look, -7, -2, -6, -8, -4, -8, -4, -6. -9. So I counted 9 games out of 19 that were sub 10-point games. If Foster's targeting Chris Paul and he's getting T's, a technical shot, 1 shot, maybe he's calling a flagrant foul. That's 2 shots. That's going to cost your team in a very low scoring game. A very close scoring game. Or Chris Paul's getting 5, 6 fouls, 4 or 5 fouls, when maybe normally he gets 1. Those extra points matter in a playoff game when we know it's close. And in addition, what does that mean? It could be a big swing. Maybe it stops the play, it stops a fast break. The team is able to get a break. Whatever it does, it can swing the game when you're calling that many fouls. So I'm not saying I don't know the number of fouls per game, but when it's close games like that and there's a very known discrepancy by one referee, it makes a difference. Paul says that as well. You've heard this. It's personal. We had a situation some years ago and it's personal. The league knows. Everybody knows. There was a meeting about it. I'm okay with the refs saying whatever they're saying, but don't use a tech to get your point across. And he said this after the game this year when he got double tech from Foster earlier in the season. I'm going to say it was like November-ish. He got a technical. Paul looked him straight up and said, "You ate female dog. T, he gone." Paul was not happy. He blew up. Steph was not happy. He was up in Foster's face. Kerr was not happy. He blew him up too. So situations like that, they can compound the point, is Foster having an even quicker whistle with him because of what happens. Now, in addition, we go back to what Spooner said. If all the referees are talking and saying Chris Paul's not a good player, he's an a-hole to us, does Foster take it upon himself and be, hey, I'm going to put a cape on, I'm going to punish Chris Paul and his team more until he learns his lesson? I'm not saying it does it. It's a thought. Is he getting punished by referees, not just Foster, Spooner, across the board because of what's happening? Or is one ref becoming a vigilante and trying to change it? Or, again, it could be, does Chris Paul deserve it? So comment your thoughts. Let me know. Does Chris Paul deserve this or does he not deserve this? Do you think he's an a-hole? Do you not? Of course, 99% of people out there watching probably have never met Chris Paul in real life, so you don't know what it's like in the day-to-day, only what you see, social media, TV, things like that. But the numbers don't lie. There's something there with Chris Paul and Scott Foster. And the second referee has come out and said Chris Paul is one of the worst players he's reffed in 30 years. Maybe Chris Paul's got to look at himself. The referee's got to look at what they're doing as well. Randy out.